So we're here at COP21 at La Bourget, right outside Paris, with Joe Robertson, who's the Global Strategy Director at Citizens Climate Lobby. And I'm a bit biased in this because I've had the opportunity of working with Joe for several months now and watching Joe work, and I am a huge admirer of your work. So if I have just sacrificed my journalistic objectivity, so be it. But I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. And and I really wanted to be able to have a conversation with you that I don't think anybody else would. Okay? And because one of the things that I've seen in watching you work that I don't know that I think might get missed is that I know that your work is a lot about collaboration. And people could look at this and say, well, people normally collaborate when there's a crisis. You know, if somebody's house burns down, the neighbors, help in, things like that. If there's a flood, people help. And so what's calling for this huge amount of collaboration is simply that we have a huge crisis. So in that way, it's not really unpredictable at all the way people are working together. But what I've seen in your work is that a real beginnings of a transformation of how people relate with each other, how people see each other, what people see possible in working with each other, that's far beyond, well, it's a big crisis and so we need a larger kind of collaboration. So I wanted that to be what we had the opportunity to speak about, and so I wanted to give you obviously the opportunity to say, what your work is, what your stand is about this, why you're here, what you want to see out of this, and the transformation that you're out to have happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's, part of what we do in Citizens Climate Lobby is work with people who may or may not have chosen to play a role in the political world in any other way, and who need to work together, form teams, build a kind of support structure so that they can actually resist the temptation to give up. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we all face when we face a crisis of this complexity, is that there's no one button you can push that fixes it. And so people tend to get frustrated with politics, get frustrated with, the slow progress of the global solution, and essentially just go away. And people don't think they're giving up, but what they do is they start saying, well, it's too hard, or those people are getting it wrong. And in a way, that's giving up your ability to contribute. So we try to make sure that people are able to find ways to work together and to keep going, to stay focused, and to be able to relate to people who disagree with them. And I think in the intergovernmental negotiating process, there's a level of complexity that people don't fully appreciate. There are 196 nations that have to work together. They have to reach consensus. All of them have to agree. And so to get to that consensus document, it's very, very difficult to really press hard on the difficult issues. Someone is going to get upset, and it's going to create a harder process of reaching consensus. So what generally happens is you have all these moving parts. You have people who are experts in the economics. You have people who are experts in the science, people who are experts in different kinds of energy technologies, people who are experts in the policies that relate to these different things. And those aren't even the same people within that same area: science, economics, technology, etc. When those people don't really come together and work together to find what connects their different issues, they can do really great work and not move the whole thing forward very far. And when in the midst of all their work, you have 196 countries that start from a position of disagreement, there's just so much complexity that you have to be prepared for that. And I think most people come here with, this is the goal we want a climate solution. I think even now, even 5 years after the whole international process was really redesigned to leave this idea in the past, people still come here looking for the Big Bang Treaty, the document that ends climate change. And that's not what anyone is trying to do. What this process is trying to do is create an agreement that moves everybody forward together, everyone at different speeds, everyone in different ways, and then basically ensures that through a number of different measures inside the agreement and also outside, they can accelerate that over time. So people still come here looking for that big bang, and the fact that they're not going to get it is going to cause some people to be very, very frustrated. So what we've been working to do, and I think this is part of what you're talking about, is give people something that they can do here that helps fill in those gaps, fill in the information gap between the different areas of expertise, fill in the human relationship gap between people who represent countries of very different circumstances. Let citizens come into the process and tell you what they actually want, instead of first trying to guess what they want, then finding out that it might not be as feasible as you thought, then realizing that you've got to talk to someone else about a new idea. Just let people come in and tell you what a good outcome would look like from their local standpoint, and then begin designing ambitious policies around all of that in every country of the world. So, our Pathway to Paris project was designed to give people a way in. It was designed to create a kind of convening space for citizens who want to engage the global process when the global process doesn't really allow for that. We've spent 14 months now building that into what it is, and we have the Citizens Voice team, and we have people who are, interviewing those who pass through these halls, and tomorrow we're launching the Citizens Climate Engagement Network to make this a standard part of global policymaking from now on. Citizens coming in and playing a role, not just with a one-time answer to a question, not with, watching a live stream, but actually being able to do those things and also keep the ball rolling and stay engaged and keep building deeper relationships with the people who are going to decide things on their behalf. So I would say the missing piece in this big global collaboration for this big global crisis is the upkeep. And I think that's why, coming from the Citizens Climate Lobby background and then doing this kind of work in this intergovernmental space, that gives us something that hasn't really been possible before, which is the knowledge of what happens when you spend a lot of time working with people one-on-one and in small groups and empowering them to keep going. And as we've done more and more of that, we've begun to find that we can now bring citizens' voices into the room. And that's, I guess, in a way, the objective.
Wow. Now, I know you said there's no silver bullet, there's no one answer, but I know that Citizens Climate Lobby, one of the emphasis or one of the chief methods that you see in mitigating this and ending the crisis is carbon pricing. And so I just wanted to, and then also that something happened yesterday that was of real significance in that area, and so I wanted to give you the opportunity to let us know what that is.
Sure. So it's true that there's no silver bullet, no one thing does it all, but at Citizens Climate Lobby we promote a revenue-neutral carbon fee on carbon-emitting fuels at the source, and then the return of all of the money to households every month in a dividend check. So that fee and dividend plan is a different kind of approach from what others do, and there's economic analysis that shows that you get, a bigger middle class, a more stable pattern of economic growth. You get an actual closing of the wealth gap. There's no other plan under consideration anywhere that actually does that effectively. And you also get steep reductions in carbon emissions quickly, efficiently, and with a growing economy. So we know it's a good plan that can get the job done. It hasn't been part of the conversation internationally before, though carbon pricing has been. The Kyoto Protocol included provisions for carbon pricing and used revenues for clean development. Some people think that structure actually limits the amount of financing overall that would go to clean development. So as the world has struggled to get 196 countries to agree on a global solution, and as we've moved away from the idea of a single global regime to nationally determined plans, a network of partners began to support the World Bank's call for a price on carbon last September 2014, and then that group began to think about how do we work together to actually make policy in the world. What if there are countries that just aren't going to do an ETS because they don't have the administrative infrastructure or the financial sector to manage that kind of plan? There must still be a way, and can we get those smart policies to them, and can we collaborate as people with similar goals but different ideas? And that led to the creation of this Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, which over the year 2015 has been going through a series of design meetings and discussions. The World Bank has released the universal principles for successful carbon pricing that they call the FASTER principles, which represent the feedback from this network of collaborators. And for the first time in those principles put out by the World Bank, you see upstream fees, administrative efficiency, socially equitable carbon pricing policies, and even fiscal dividends, revenue return to households as options. And so we now have a much more inclusive environment. Yesterday, on the first day of the COP21, the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition officially launched. And so it's now a new global policymaking body. And there are a few things that are very revolutionary about that. One is that this coalition has the mission of moving carbon pricing into every country's climate strategies by 2020.
Wow.
So that mission exists is revolutionary.
Wow.
Two, it puts governments, intergovernmental agencies, non-governmental organizations like Citizens Climate Lobby, and businesses, including big investors and oil companies, at the same table. Three, it's revolutionary because at that table, those partners are all equals. That's the way it's been designed. And then the fourth thing is that when this actual coalition gets moving, it's going to have the opportunity to give each of these different jurisdictions that wants to price carbon the best advice on what can fit into that circumstance. And it's going to include things like fees and dividends as options, where some countries are going to benefit much more economically from that than from other things. So we now have a way to actually do carbon pricing everywhere around the world without having to create a global regime, without having to throw the dart at the perfect target to get the price right. We can get it right by going step by step, country by country. And what's, I think, so important and so exciting to those of us who are part of that process is that on the first day of the COP21, one of the biggest challenges facing the people here has been addressed.
Wow.
And so just one last thing on that is that, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I guess it was, somebody said that carbon pricing is off the table. And it's
as far as the text of the agreement?
Exactly. So that's the exact question, right? What is the table made of? Some people think it's made of the text. And it may or may not include carbon pricing provisions. What's important is that the text is not the table. The text is not the whole COP21.
Yes.
So the French government, the ADP, which is the drafting working group, have said that the agreement and the legal decisions that go with it are one pillar out of 4. Then there are 3 others, and the other 3 are the national plans, the INDCs,
Right.
the financing mechanism, whatever that is, and ideally that's going to include really changing the incentives and redesigning the whole financial sector across the world so that it's no longer creating climate damage. That was something that Christiana Figueres said to us in May in Paris, well, I guess across town.
Yes.
And then the 4th pillar are action platforms for implementation. The Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition is one of those action platforms. What that means is that we've got something that coming out of the 4th pillar can motivate financing. It can strengthen those country plans, the 2nd pillar, and then it can reinforce the provisions that are in the agreement, which don't have to be about carbon pricing, but will be strengthened significantly by the fact that it's happening.
Wow. And then the last thing is, people watching that, especially people that really haven't had any idea what's really happening, but they know that this conference is happening, it's a big deal, and speeches and all of that. How would you want them left hearing all of this? Should they be left, for example, okay, we've turned the corner now. We've turned the corner and we actually can see the end in sight. Is it that we've kind of now got a framework of something to work from, but we've got to work 5 times harder in it? So should people be left, how would you want people left?
Yeah, I would want them left thinking that up until a certain point, this whole process was about an incredible challenge, which was to get everyone to agree to one big thing that would address this global crisis.
Yes.
And after a certain point, it shifted to how do we get everybody essentially racing forward to do as much as they possibly can as soon as they can. What I would want people left with this news is that that's where we now are. Whatever happens in the Paris Agreement, we are now in a different world in terms of climate action, where the world's biggest corporations, the world's biggest polluting countries, the world's biggest oil-producing companies are taking action to make sure that when we move policies forward into the real world, they're actually going to do something about climate change, and not just do something, but they will fit into a matrix of policy options that actually keeps getting stronger over time. And that's the key thing here, is that December 11th in Paris, which is the scheduled end of this negotiating session, isn't going to be the end of climate change.
Yes.
And it's not going to be the end of rising global emissions.
Yes.
What it can be, though, is the thing that describes how we actually build all those different pieces of the puzzle into something that gets stronger and stronger and stronger as everything settles into place, and as people get used to that new environment, and as businesses and countries are more willing to actually compete with each other in a friendly way to do better and to be stronger and to lead. We have turned that corner now.
Wow. And is this the structure that will then oversee kind of all of those different components coming together against what's necessary to keep the future sustainable?
I would say that this structure, meaning the UNFCCC process, I think it's what it really is it's a convening space. In the United States, we have a legislature. Our Congress is a convening space where, every 750,000 or so Americans get to send one representative, and every state gets to send 2 senators, and those people convene and then they discuss how to address society's issues. This is not a Congress, it's not the same kind of representative process, but that's what it is. People are gathering here in order to make policy. That's not going to stop after COP21.
Yes.
It's going to go on. We already know COP22 is going to happen in Morocco a year from now.
Yes.
It's not so much that there's a regime or a structure that's going to control everything.
Yes.
What it is, I think, is this is a convening space where people from all over the world come together and figure out how the different pieces of this puzzle fit together so that we keep doing more and doing it faster and doing it with a more decisive push. I think we've now set that in motion. That's what the Paris Agreement is going to essentially, solidify.
Yes.
And then the COP conferences and the UNFCCC negotiations, they're going to be that convening space where the world comes together and says, okay, let's do this better and more and faster.
Wow. And then lastly is with all of this that has happened, and that when you talk about we're now in a different world, what do you see that this makes possible for us beyond the issue of climate change?
That's such a great question, actually. That's something that I think we should all be talking about more than we are. And there are a lot of opportunities in addressing climate change effectively. The reason climate change is happening is because our economies are badly designed. They've been designed from an ancient idea that wealth is scarce and the things that make life livable are not abundant enough to give everybody comfort. That's really a position that empowers the wrong kind of political leadership. And what it's done to our economic landscape is it's incentivized the creation of business practices that essentially borrow against future harm. So I do something now, I don't have to take care of it, I don't have to pay for it, your grandchildren can pay for it.
Oh, I'm going to interrupt just because this just strikes to such the heart of the matter of what we're out to bring people, is that when you just reference those two, what we would call them notions or myths, or then it really does bring into existence a particular reality and the way people operate in life.
Yeah.
And if those myths are part of what's been broken down here or re-examined or at least kind of brought to the light of day as maybe not actually the truth or the way it is, but something that at some point somebody said this is how life goes, then that really does kind of get to the heart of the matter of all of this way beyond climate change.
Yeah, it does. And so there are a lot of opportunities if we get it right. Because we have this chance to shift away from that distorted economic way of thinking,
Yes.
which distorts our political landscape, which creates a natural lust for imbalanced power and abuse, we have the chance to correct those things. We have the chance for people across the world to have more opportunity to earn based on their talent and ingenuity, to create better societies in their local communities and in their wider regions. And we have the opportunity for people to learn how to work together instead of viewing each other as with suspicion. Not every place in the world has a kind of cultural dynamic where you can get together with people that you barely know, work in good faith, rely on their willingness to get the job done effectively. It takes a lot of generations of a kind of educational process and civics for people to really understand that that's a feasible way of doing business. And I think we now have the opportunity to make that the norm, where people collaborate, where they begin to work in good faith, where they want everyone around them to have education and opportunity, and where we can actually afford all of that because we're not wasting money on unnecessary harm.
Yeah, and where the other thing I hear is where in order for me to have what I need, you have to have less.
Right. Well, that's been the standard, right?
Yes.
And I think it's been since the 1950s, 60s, when Buckminster Fuller said that we're facing utopia or oblivion, that's now our choice, we've gone too far. He was saying that, we don't have to live like that. We don't have to live by the feudal paradigm where the powerful are powerful and everybody else has to just, get by.
Yes.
We can now live in a way where in order for me to have what I need or what I want, you should have what you need and what you want. And our ability to thrive in our own way reinforces the ability of the other to do so as well.
Well, thank you. I just really applaud your work. Congratulations on the enormous accomplishment yesterday in terms of all the work that you've been doing. And, behalf of a lot of people that you'll never meet, I really want to thank you for, as you say, bringing into existence a whole new world.
Well, we're all just one little part of it, but thank
right.
you. That's very
Yeah.
nice.